Hi everyone, and welcome to our panel today. Thank you for joining us for this panel on investing in African youth for finance-led inclusive climate action. We're very excited to have you today and very excited to get into some of the topics we have. My name is Mary Kashangaki and I am the Assistant Manager with the Digital Innovation Team here at FSD Africa, a specialized development organization focused on making finance work for Africa's future. Today we're going to delve into the topic of financial inclusion and its relationship with addressing climate challenges. We'll ask the questions, is financial inclusion keeping up with the pace of change that it needs to be able to address the pressing climate challenges we have today? What innovation is required? And what more still needs to be done to address these challenges? We'll speak to some innovators as well as people working to support innovators in the space. But first, before we dive in, I'd like to introduce my panel here today. Shirley Mburu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Mary. My name is Shirley Mburu, and I'm the Program Director of TECA, which stands for Triggering Exponential Climate Action. TECA is an initiative of BFA Global, and it is our founding funders are FSD Africa. Under TECA, we support African youth and beyond to develop ideas into climate solutions. And today we actually have two TECA founders, Fardosa and Aman.
Fardosa Mustafa is an environmental lawyer with a master's in community development. Our combined experience in conservation, policy, and legal frameworks give us the edge of being able to understand not only the problems we've identified, but also the possible solutions in this space. Nature-based solutions are one of the most effective ways that you could fight climate change, and mangrove restoration is particularly effective. The average healthy mangrove ecosystem can sequester up to 4 times more carbon than a land-based forest. Armed with these facts and opportunities, Registry further investigated by conducting user research in Kirepwe, a self-help group that is based in the Kenyan coastline. And when we entered into this community, we discovered the sad sight of kilometers of dead mangrove seedlings. Upon further investigation, we found a community that had not received the appropriate technical support to conduct mangrove restoration. Additionally, this community was disengaged with the mangrove restoration process because they described a lack of tangible benefits reaching them at a community level. This lines up with what data tells us. Of carbon project investments, 80% of those co-benefits never reach the community, which is the custodian of these restoration projects. Registry was formed in order to solve for these issues. On one end, we are capacitating communities with the technical support to conduct mangrove restoration, and on the other end, we are providing a supply of credible carbon projects that are community-led. One of the things that we noted that was delaying the receiving of co-benefits as a result of carbon projects is that there were a lot of intermediaries within the system. So our solution is to train community members themselves to be monitors. And how we do this is that we supply tech enablement such as satellite imagery, IoT devices, and AI so that community members are able to be monitors of their own projects and supply real-time data of these restoration projects onto our platform. By 2025, we want to onboard 300 community-led mangrove restoration projects along the Western Indian Ocean and become a trusted source of restoration data in Africa. Join us on our journey to empower communities to develop their resilience as well as to deliver credible projects for carbon markets.
My name is Aman. I am the CEO of Wezesha Aqua Farms. We have a solution that makes available aquaculture cages for lease to local fishing communities. We lease these cages at scale, provide quality fingerlings, fish feed, and a technical expertise, as well as a guaranteed off-taker market. Our team is the best team to execute this model at this time, because we come with a diverse set of skills and diverse perspectives from around the East African region. Allow me to introduce you to Nesoke. a 30-year-old father of two and a fisherman from Mwanza, Tanzania. Nisoke spends 15 hours a day, mostly at night. Only 7 years ago, he would arrive every morning at the landing site with a boat full of fish. Today, he can barely fill half his boat. Similar sentiments of reduced catch and incomes are echoed across all fishing communities in the Great Lakes region of Eastern Africa, where over 10 million people are dependent on the sector for an income. We need to find a solution, and that solution is aquaculture. At Wezesha, we lease these cages at scale, provide quality fingerlings and fish feed, and technical expertise, as well as a guaranteed off-taker market, making it less risky for local fishing communities to practice aquaculture. A typical cage can cost $18,000, way beyond the financial means of most of these fisherfolk. We lease them from $250 per month, providing fishermen like Nisoke the opportunity to earn up to $52,000 per season, 60% more than what he currently earns in wild fishing. So today, I invite you to join us in reimagining the aquaculture industry in Africa. You have the opportunity to be a part of something truly transformational and to make a positive impact in the lives of these local fishing communities in East Africa and beyond.
Thank you all for joining us today. Before we hear from these wonderful innovators, I thought we should explore a little bit the question we're asking today and why we're working in this space in the first place. So Shirley, you're the Africa lead for TECA, and we work closely together on TECA, and it all came from the idea that there is a relationship between finance and climate action. And I'd like to hear from you a little bit about why TECA, why finance and climate action.
Thanks, Mary. So BFA Global and FSD Africa both have a long history in financial inclusion, and there's ample evidence on how financial inclusion is an effective tool for bolstering resilience. If you think about, say, weather insurance and how it has impacted farmers, research has been done, and actually control studies have been done in Ghana, and what they found is that farmers who had weather insurance were more likely to invest more in their farms or take higher risk, resulting in higher incomes. So for a long time, we've been thinking about finance and how it bolsters people, e.g. through their livelihoods, like the example I've given. But it's high time we also started thinking about how can finance be bundled with a lens on how it bolsters the resilience of the planet as well. Because ultimately, we are all guardians of our planet, and we need to protect the environment in the everyday livelihood activities that we undertake, as well as continuing to bolster our own resilience. And that is where TECA is coming to play a part by creating solutions that intentionally go to serve people and planet in terms of bolstering them against climate shocks.
Even as I reflect on why FSD Africa invested in TECA in the first place, I think it's important to think about finance as a tool and to think of the impact that we're trying to have, not just for people, but for people and planet. And I think the thesis that TECA is working with is a part and a big part of the puzzle, but it's an ecosystem question. It's about doing this at scale. It's about thinking about innovation that is both impactful, scalable, and exponential, and moves quickly. And I think TECA being a big part of that puzzle in terms of launching these innovations to ensure, because I think the question was also, we're not seeing enough of this innovation. But two, we're also not seeing enough investment into these innovations and into this space, into building our understanding and knowledge. So both of us having that appreciation for the relationship between finance and climate action, I think it's been an exciting partnership so far. And it's led to some exciting things. We have now our two ventures here, our two founders here, new founders, and we're really excited to hear from you. But before we hear about the solutions, I'd love to hear a little bit about What challenges have you seen specifically when it comes to access to finance or financial inclusion as you began to think about developing a solution in the first place and interacted with these communities? Maybe I can start with you, Aman.
Thank you for that, Mary. We've come across quite a few gaps, and there's quite a few challenges that we saw. The main one is access to the formal financial system. We realize that not many people have access to the formal financial system. Another thing that we saw is that trust plays a big role, and these communities have many times had bad experiences with the formal financial system. That way they try and stay away from it. There's also a cultural element to it. There's some cultures that do not like being part of a formal financial system. Another thing that we saw is there's a lack of financial literacy. So not many people understand money management, credit or debt management for that matter. And these were, of course, this is part of quite a few other challenges, but these were the key ones that stood out for us.
Just to piggyback off what Aman has just said, because we work in a very similar ecosystem, a lot of these barriers and challenges are more or less the same, and it's that lack of the last mile financial inclusion for the activities and livelihood activities that these communities are undertaking. And for us, we also saw that as much as these communities are taking part in this informal systems, there's also a lack of, or rather a challenge of them tapping into the formal system. So that was really one of the biggest challenges that we saw faced by these communities.
What's interesting about this first wave is that we were specifically focusing on the blue economy and communities that are working either near oceans, lakes, water bodies, and in and around the economy there. And I think we chose to focus on that for the first wave, but certainly there are others. I think I'd love to hear from you, Shirley, a little bit about what you observed as you supported these startups and going into these communities.
Thanks, Mary. That's a good question. So we talked about the challenges of finance and current financial tools that are available to these communities that we're serving. Them not being adapted for the type of, say, livelihoods or people that we aim to serve. And I'll give an example of a fisher we met at the south coast of Kenya. And his predicament was that he has been a fisher for the longest time. His father was a fisher, his granddad was a fisher, but he's seen fish stocks dwindling over the years to the point that he would not wish it for his son to become a fisher. He doesn't have the tools that it takes to get fish in today's world. He'd need a boat that goes further to be able to get a sustainable income for him. And if he had to be able to afford such a boat or save towards such a boat, the financial tools available to him are not adequate. They do not, they are not adequate. He'd not be able to go get a loan from a bank because of the variability of his income, and also because his income is little as well. So these are some of the challenges that founders like Fardosa and Aman are facing in terms of if they want to create financial tools that are impactful, they have to go an extra mile than the current financial services currently go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that example really adds a little bit of color to the issue and the relationship between finance and building resilience and the ever-present urgent need here we have to address these challenges brought about by climate change. So I guess my next question definitely goes to the two of you again. I'd love to hear about what kind of solutions you're coming up with to address these challenges. Fardosa, tell us a little bit about what Registry is doing in terms of addressing the challenges you're seeing in the field.
Thank you, Mary, for that question and for giving me the opportunity to talk about what Registry is doing. So like I said, we are supporting community-led ecosystem restoration. And how we do this, one of the challenges that we found was that these communities do not have access to the like physical inputs that they need to conduct the actual restoration work, and that is because of lack of finances, because they need money to buy this infrastructure. So what we are doing is we are setting up a restoration hub where they can come and access this community, this infrastructure to carry out effective and efficient ecosystem restoration. And then the other part of that is the restoration hub also has an online platform where they can kind of showcase the projects that they're doing, and not just in ecosystem restoration, but also the alternative livelihood activities. And the angle for us when it comes to now financial inclusion, just coming back to the conversation, is creating an ease of income where, yes, they are doing this restoration, but how are they also gaining from it, apart from also benefiting the planet, but we also need to benefit the people. So one way we are doing that is creating a crowdfunding platform where we can kind of create access to climate finance, and also say, for example, something like tourism. When people come to Watamu, which is a very like known tourism destination, how can maybe people who connect with these communities, how can they support them beyond maybe just giving them something for the day, you know? So that's also one of the way that we are doing. And like I don't know if I mentioned this already, but we are developing a carbon credit project in Watamu as well, and I'd be happy to also go deeper into that at a later time. Yeah, so that's what we are doing at the moment, creating systems that these communities can benefit from climate finance that doesn't just necessarily rely on the ecosystem restoration only.
Can you tell me about the role of technology in that? And I know you've talked about a platform for crowdfunding, but could you just talk a little bit more, and how are the communities you're working interacting with this, and how are you building that capacity to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what the crowdfunding platform is supposed to serve is creating a space where these communities can also keep track of the work that they are doing and what kind of resources that they are putting into it, and quantifying that, because without that they are also not able to quantify the resources or like the financial benefits that can flow from that. So through that, our platform will have features such as saving through the platform, maybe borrowing from each other, because at the moment the way they bank is just specifically like through different banks, but maybe if we can pool all their resources and enable them to have access to each other's resources, so they're also not working in silos, and just creating that partnership and collaboration within these communities, because they work also very closely to each other. So just beyond physical proximity, we also want to create proximity for their resources.
Amazing, amazing. Aman, I would love to hear about how Wezesha Aqua Farms is supporting the communities and really trying to address some of the challenges that you've seen in the field.
Thank you for that question, Mary. We're making aquaculture accessible and affordable. And the reason why we're doing that is because there's a dwindling wild catch fish stock in the lake. So what we are doing is we are building out the infrastructure, and we are providing the infrastructure on a lease-to-own model to these fisher communities. And we focus mainly on groups. So 90% of the fisher folk are organized in groups, and these are cooperatives or beach management units. And through that system, we are able to allocate them a specific part of the infrastructure. But not only that, we also give them access to inputs, quality inputs, and we give them access to technical expertise. Technical expertise to make the process of aquaculture sustainable. In that, we realize that, okay, even though we can give them accessibility and affordability to infrastructure, there's still high costs in feed and in the fingerlings. So we sought out to find a way in which we can reduce their financial burden to get into the process. And we introduced an embedded credit system and we use our feed and our fingerlings within this embedded credit system for them to be able to access it more easily. And we've seen a drastic mind shift, right? A mindset shift where these communities are feeling that no, they can actually practice aquaculture without having the necessary capital to deploy to practice aquaculture.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I'd like to hear a little bit more about this leasing model. How did you land on lease to own, and why did you go down this path versus maybe renting the space or other options that they might have, or even buying the cages outright, right, for the farmers? Yeah.
So the whole idea behind it was when we were doing our initial research and our field visits, we noticed that the biggest impediment to practicing aquaculture is infrastructure. So how can we make infrastructure more affordable was the first thing. And of course accessible, because quality infrastructure comes at a price. So what we did was we came up with a rental model first. And when we spoke to the communities about the rental model, they were like, how long would we rent it for? The thing here is that we also want to promote agency and ownership, right? So that's when we kind of pivoted and we're like, okay, let's do a lease to own model, where you're renting it technically, but you're renting it to own it at the end of the day. So that was one pivot that happened while we were thinking about the model, especially when it came to infrastructure and leasing.
Just picking up on this solution that you've developed around cages and the lease to own model, I'd like to understand the relationship between climate action and the cages themselves and how they're helping to build resilience for these farmers and really addressing a climate challenge.
So what we realized was that, one, there's depleting wild fish catch in our water bodies, be it in lakes or in oceans. It's a common trend. And what this was doing is that it is affecting the livelihoods of these fisher communities. We also have to understand that these fisher communities have been predominantly fishing. That is the only source of livelihood. It's difficult to tell a fisherman to start growing maize when he's been fishing for generations, including his family, his forefathers were all fishermen. So we have to look for a solution where these people can continue getting access to supply of fish, right? And in that way, being more resilient in terms of their livelihoods. So that's why we came up with the concept of fish farming, because fish farming is a way for them to still have that supply, still be able to sell the fish, and still be able to get an income based on what they've been doing for the longest time.
Radosa, you also have a similar restoration hub angle to your product. Would you like to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. So our restoration hub has a sort of similar model to Wezesha in that we provide this infrastructure to these communities like through a leasing model that we are still actually testing out. So what they do is this, and this equipment I'm talking about is like gloves, gumboots, wheelbarrows, potting bags for the seedlings. Things that, yes, the physical inputs that require a bit of capital that these communities do not have. So just to kind of bridge that gap between their need and what they need to make it happen, that's what the Restoration Hub is for. That's operated now through an online platform. Yes.
It's been really interesting to hear about the different things you guys are doing. And I wonder, when we think about financial inclusion and we think about the finance divide and the gap, there's a divide that keeps coming up, which is this gender divide. And we know from evidence and discourse globally that there is a disproportionate effect on women and youth and young people and children from climate change and the challenges brought about it. I'd like to hear from you. Are you seeing some of that in the field as you're working with these communities? And how are you thinking about addressing them as you develop solutions? Let's start with you, Radosa.
So just to start, about 66% of the people, like the community members that we work with, are actually women. So this means that they are the larger labor force when it comes to ecosystem restoration. However, there's also the cultural issues to consider in this ecosystem. As much as it's the women that do a lot of the labor force, a lot of the money somehow flows to the men because they control, I guess, the financial systems within these communities. And then also when it comes to the youth, we notice that they are more disengaged from the ecosystem restoration process. And because it doesn't give them quick money, which is what they're looking for as young people. And that's like a really huge challenge that we faced while working with these communities. Because yes, maybe the youth have access to the digital systems, but they're not in this ecosystem restoration space, which is where we want to draw them in and kind of bridge that gap between the people doing the restoration and the people who have access to the digital systems. So what we are doing as registry is a kind of training digital helpers within these community groups who are usually young people, because they may not want to do the restoration itself, but they still bring value in that they can understand these financial systems and they can help them even use our platform and the restoration hub and things like that. So that's the divide that we've seen, and that's how we are trying to tackle it.
Aman, is Wezesha thinking about these divides? And if so, how are you thinking about addressing them?
Yes, we are thinking about these divides, and what we've seen from our work what we've been doing is that women are actually at the bottom of the value chain. This being a value chain that's not horizontal but a vertical value chain, and women come at the bottom. And because of this system and structure that has been in place for a very long time, the women end up becoming more of the victims in the system and the sufferers of the system. So right now we are working on a gender smart product, which thanks to the TECA program, we've managed to get a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to implement. And we're looking at how we can get women into higher up the value chain of the fishing industry. And by providing them aquaculture solutions, where they become the aquaculturists themselves and they become the owners of this facility.
Shirley, I know you've been working closely with these startups as they're trying to think about how they're going to address some of these gaps and these challenges and dealing directly with the communities. I'd love to hear your perspectives on the question of divides and what kind of solutions are needed there.
Great. I was in a session yesterday and they were saying that when you design for everyone, you end up designing for no one. But when you design for women, you end up designing for everyone. And TECA as a program has been designed that way. From the word go, we've been very intentional about making sure that we harness more women into the fellowship and we get more women founders and empower them to build companies that ultimately will serve women in addition to serving everyone else in the ecosystem. We ended up having 54% of the fellows being women. We ended up having 4 out of 7 CEOs being women. And we also took all the fellows through a gender smart product design workshop funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates to get them thinking about, as they build these companies and build these solutions, how can they actively and intentionally think about serving women and improving the lives of women. And out of this program, this is where Wezesha came up with a pilot that ended up winning the challenge, and they're receiving about $13,000 to deploy the pilot to include more women within their business model.
I really like that quote. I think it adds a lot. It really frames this discussion. When you design for everyone, you design for no one. And I think that's really the importance in thinking about the nuances and the specific communities, and possibly even why, as TECA, we decided to focus on blue economy first. So we're really thinking about very specific challenges there. It's been so exciting hearing about what you both are doing, what we all are doing. I'd love to hear in your thoughts, what next for Registry and Wezesha, but also in the wider ecosystem, what you think is needed, what more needs to be done?
Yeah, so what we see the medium to short-term future being is that we want to create a product that, one, not only supports fish farming, but also supports the groups who are partaking in this process financially, and gives them the financial tools to be able to practice it more sustainably. In the wider ecosystem, I think a lot of people need to start thinking about how to innovate in micro value chains instead of trying to innovate just more generally. And I think that even takes us back to what Shirley said. If you design for everyone, you're designing for no one. But look at it more case specific, whether it's mangrove restoration or whether it's providing equipment to fishermen who can go deep into the oceans for a better catch, or even providing aquaculture solutions. We need to think of it in a more specific scale, in a more micro level, so that we can actually get solutions to the people who are most vulnerable and the people who need it the most.
Amazing. Bardosa, what next for Registry?
The most exciting thing that we are looking at now, apart from supporting the community-led ecosystem restoration, is developing a blue carbon credit project in Watamu. And we have project development partners that we are currently developing the project with. And we are really hopeful that this project would directly benefit the communities, especially financially, and of course, while protecting the planet at the same time. As you know, there's like a lot of also conversation around carbon credits and whether they're actually beneficial to the communities who own these resources. And we are hoping that we will do different and we will do better in ensuring that the communities have direct access to these financial benefits, and also be a part of the process from inception all the way to maturity of the project. So that's like the most exciting thing in our pipeline.
Wow. I'm really excited to see where you go with these carbon credits. I think for me from this conversation, it's clear where there are gaps. Has been a lot of progress. There are already products in the market, but there is need to do better, do more, do it faster to help address climate challenges, not just for people, but also for the planet, as we talked about earlier. And I'm just so excited to have heard you both here speaking about your innovations. I think this at the core is the importance of investing in youth, the energy, the excitement, and having you both here are perfect examples of the kind of innovation and how we can leverage technology. For me, I'd love to see a wider ecosystem. As FSD Africa, that is at the core of our goal, building an ecosystem and a support system around these innovators, but also around the systems and structures that need to be in place. We need more funding in place, not just for TECA, or programs like TECA, which are supporting these startups, but for the startups themselves, to get them to launch, past launch, to growth, past growth, to scale, to support and have the impact that they need. And for me, that's where I see the future is. That's where I see more players need to come in and walk the journey alongside us, because partnership is at the core of what we're doing. Speaking of partnerships, Shirley, we've been working together with you the last year. It's been amazing to see the startups that have come out. What do you see as the future of TECA, of the ecosystem, of the space?
So I'm really excited about the future for TECA. We recently launched the Africa Blue Wave in partnership with FSD Africa and the IUCN, with funding from the Canadian government and the UK aid. The same wave will be implemented in a partnership with Ocean Hub Africa as well. I'd like to this is a call to action to all those innovators or entrepreneurs who'd want to create solutions within a climate resilience space. Please come join us. Also, the experts and enthusiasts, we can't do this alone. We need a community to work with these innovators. In terms of partnership at the ecosystems level, we are working with the CIFA Alliance to mobilize the industry of financial sector players to create knowledge and create products that solve for climate resilience.
Thank you so much, Shirley, and thank you to all our panelists. It has been a pleasure working alongside TECA and the innovators during the last year, and we are excited to be a part of this second wave. If you are interested in being a part of this wave, please click the link, and thank you so much for joining us.